Hi folks, welcome back. Thank you for watching. Please do hit subscribe if you haven't done so yet. It really does help when you do that. So, welcome to the end of February Q&A video. Considering this month is a few days shorter than most months, there's still a hell of a lot to get through today. You guys have been so busy in the comment sections. So, let's get right to it. Let's start with a nice angry question. Gary Eckel, $295? Ha ha ha, what's your cut? Pickups are a joke, people. It's just wire and a cheap-ass magnet. Dream all you want. Well, I replied to Gary and I said, and a meal prepared by a top chef is just cow and some cheap-ass potatoes. Yes, the raw ingredients are very important, and in a pickup they're not necessarily hugely expensive, but what you're paying for is the expertise in putting it all together and working out the technical specifications. So in a pickup, yes, it's a fundamentally simple concept. It is a magnet wrapped in wire, but what sort of magnet? What sort of gauge wire is the winder used? In a humbucker, what's the bobbin material? Is the wire wound onto the bobbins just on straight away, or is it kind of scatter wound? Is there an offset between the two coils? What's the DC resistance? Are they covered or uncovered? What material are the slugs and pole screws made out of? What's the balance between the neck and bridge pickup? All those things, that's what you're paying for, the expertise in putting it all together. And trust me, if you go to a top restaurant, you're going to pay more for your meal than the cost of the vegetables. So that's where the price comes in with boutique pickups. Yes, they're expensive, but you do get a very knowledgeable set of ears and expertise in putting it all together. And in the case of OX4 and Mark Stow's work, I'm yet to play a set of his pickups that I haven't absolutely loved. Bandit Sharp. Please excuse my ignorance, but I've just bought one of these solely based on watching this review. Fantastic. Your tone and playing is the sound in my head. Question is though, I've got a few nice overdrive pedals, Effectro Blackbird, Keeley D&M, Strymon Sunset and Riverside, etc. But should the fire bottle be used before or after these in the chain? All other effects are through the loop in a Fryette power station. Well, with the fire bottle, it's essentially a clean tube boost pedal, but it does have the Very Z switch on the top, or Very Zod switch as we established last month. And that relies on seeing a high impedance signal to work. So if you've got a true bypass pedal that's turned off before the fire bottle, that's absolutely fine. But any pedal that's turned on or a buffered bypass pedal will essentially stop that switch from working because you'll be giving this pedal a low impedance signal. So it is designed to be first in chain, but if you're not fussed about using that switch, it can go anywhere. Now, when using a boost pedal, where you put it in relation to overdrive pedals gives a very different result. So if you put a boost into your overdrive pedal, you'll essentially slam the signal harder into the clipping stage of the overdrive and get more gain. If you put it after your overdrive, assuming it has enough headroom to handle it, which this one does, and assuming your amp is set with a good amount of headroom too, you'll get more level volume. It won't change the sound hugely, you'll just get more level for a solo boost, for example. So if you want to use a Very Z switch, it's probably best to put it at the start of the chain, but if you just want to use it as a really nice tube boost, I would suggest maybe putting it in the middle of your overdrives. So I think the two Strymon pedals are digital overdrives, I believe. Maybe put this after that to add a little bit of analog tube warmth to everything and boost the level for a solo boost. But then you could also put it into the front end of your Blackbird, if that's after this in chain, to create more gain. And you've got tubes going into tubes, and I'm sure that would sound absolutely glorious. So yeah, where you put a boost, it gives a very different result. But this is designed to go first in chain primarily, but it can go anywhere. Sounds wonderful. The Tone Lounge, very interesting. There's another element about the quality of sound from a pedal that needs to be addressed. Not everyone knows what to listen for. You could put a boutique fancy hand-wired pedal and a €30 clone in front of certain guitarists, and in a blindfold challenge they could not tell the difference. The 5% difference requires great ears and someone with enough experience to know what to listen for. Absolutely, and that's what I'm all about on this channel. And this channel won't be for everybody. There is another question here from Fetstore, comment from Fetstore saying, I'm sure the audience at your gigs goes, yep, that's a 14-pin chip in that pedal, all right. Yeah, exactly. That's not what this channel is about. I'm all about kind of the tone chasing, getting into the real kind of minutiae and tweaking tiny things for subtle differences. But that's absolutely valid, as is the attitude of someone who goes, it sounds like a guitar. I want a Les Paul to sound like a Les Paul. Don't care if it's got a high output humbucker, a powerful P90s. I just want a Les Paul. That's absolutely valid too. it's just not really what this channel is about. So yeah, both approaches are valid, and it is a very important point when you're critiquing overdrive pedals, for example, and comparing them. We are listening for differences. We are trying to find differences, whereas some people just hear an overdrive guitar sound and that's enough. They're not worried about, you know, the tiny little bump at 3.2K in the way that we are. It's a very, very important point. But yes, this channel is all about the kind of subtle tone chasing and getting into those really fine details for very subtle changes. The audience won't tell the difference, but we will. David Schneebacker. As a left-handed player, you only have so much to choose from when you buy any kind of equipment or pots for your guitar, as I'm sure you're aware of too. I am. So recently I bought 3 250k left-handed CTS pots to upgrade my 91 Korean Vesta Strat. Can I use 3 identical pots as tone and volume pots, or do I have to buy something else? Unfortunately, my dealer did not specify on whether these were tone or volume pots. It just says audio pots on the package. Audio in this instance will refer to the taper of the pot. So in the world of guitar potentiometers, there's kind of 2 tapers you come across. One's much more common than the other. A linear taper, a taper essentially refers to the way the pot behaves, turning it from 10 down to 1. So a linear taper will be a completely straight line. So at 10, you'll get 100% of your guitar's volume. At 5, 50%, 3, 30%. It's a completely straight path from 10 down to 0. Audio taper or logarithmic taper is essentially a curve. It'll go from 10 quite quickly down and then flatten out as you get down. So going from 10 to 8 might lose 70% of the guitar's volume. Going up from 1 to 3 will make very little difference. So it's a complete curve. So that's what audio will refer to in this instance. It's the taper rather than what the pot's designed for. In terms of whether you can use the same pot for volume and tone, yeah, they are completely identical. They're the same component. It just depends on how you wire them up, whether it's connected to a tone capacitor or one side has a pickup and the other side's grounded to earth, because that will work as a volume control. So they are exactly the same components. You can use those pots in all those situations. Mike Roberti. Not even close to Beano tone. Ragged, fizzy and buzzy. Great playing, but not Beano tone. So that was this guitar here. There's more questions on this guitar coming up when I did the full kind of modding it from stock spec to kind of late 50 spec. But I did a standalone demo of these pickups before I released that video. These are the OX4 Beanos. Now, those pickups are designed to get you one step closer to the Beano tone. They're not a guaranteed, you will sound like Clapton on the Beano album, because of course the whole rest of your rig makes a huge difference. The pickups are only a small part of it. So I'm using a very different amp to Eric, using a different speaker, different power tubes probably. I'm using close mics rather than a distance mic. I'm not going through a console tracking to tape. I don't have bleed from other microphones on different instruments in a room. I'm using a completely different setup. So those pickups will move you closer, but they're never going to be a guaranteed ticket to the tone unless you're using the exact same rig in the same studio and the same recording setup. So yeah, they moved it closer to the Beano tone. That's all they're really able to do. Your rig will have a big bearing on how those pickups sound. Monkey Magic. Sounds good. I was put off from the Killer V because I didn't want the preamp. This looks good. And this is the Crazy Tube Circuit's Memphis, which is a kind of magnetone style vibrato. And as they say, it is half of their Killer V pedal. So this pedal doesn't have the overdrive circuit, but it does have a preamp in it, and that does gain up and clip. To be honest, I'm surprised how much it clips this pedal, because it has a charge pump to up the 9-volt input to 18 volts for more headroom, and yet it's still quite crunchy. So if you're after a really squeaky clean vibrato pedal, it probably isn't the one for you. But when you just accept that this gains up a bit and you play to the crunch rather than playing really timidly to try and stop it crunching, it sounds absolutely mega. So you do have to kind of get to know this pedal a bit, but it is absolutely wonderful when you do. Bad Motivator. Surely in mini pots the radius is smaller, so the sweep is effectively quicker. No, they're exactly the same. So if you imagine like a mini pot doing that and a full-size CTS pot doing that, yes, the wiper will be moving quicker in the bigger pot because it's further out from the kind of centre of the pot, but it's travelling a longer distance. So it will make absolutely no difference. Doing that, I can feel a lot more air moving past my hand than I can on this hand, but the actual kind of radial distance it moves is exactly the same. So the only difference between a mini pot and a full-size pot is the physical size. That's it. It won't sort of feel any different in terms of taper whatsoever. Gareth Parry. Hi Joe, great video and demo. Thank you. I have the exact same model Romany Plus. That's the Cornell Romany Plus sort of little 10-watt tweed champ amp. Absolutely amazing thing. With 3 power settings, I have the stock Jensen JCH 1270, and I find it a bit harsh when the volume is turned up and it overdrives. Is the Jensen P12Q much better, or would I be better off paying more and getting the Celestian Blue or Fane A60? Any thoughts on the G12M Greenback? I haven't played a Greenback for a long time. I remember that speaker being quite dark and muffled in the top end, which I guess is why it's so suited to a plexi amp, because they're traditionally quite sort of buzzy, especially with Allen & Co speakers. So that might actually be up your street if you're after that kind of taming of the top end. I did make a video a good few years ago now comparing the stock Jensen ceramic speaker in the Cornell with the what was it, the P12Q, sorry, and they're fairly close. There are subtle differences in there. The P12Q is a bit more extended in the high end, and low end the stock speaker is a bit more middly, but they're pretty much ballpark. I would recommend going for either the Blue or the A60. I would probably recommend the A60 because it's much flatter in the mid-range. The Celestian Blue has that kind of typical Celestian upper mid-range bite to it, and if you're trying to tame the snarl in the amp, that might actually make it worse. So I would very much recommend the A60. If you watch my original demo of the A60, I do run it in the Cornell, both with the EQ in for a more kind of scoopy Fender thing, and also with the EQ defeated for that kind of super heavy gain, honky, middly sort of tweed champ crapping itself sound. Sounds absolutely amazing. And even though the A60 is a 60-watt speaker, and it does like to have a lot of wattage thrown at it, it still sounds spectacular in a small combo amp in a way that a lot of higher powered speakers don't. So I would recommend the A60 out of all that lot. There is the discount code of Perky 10 if you buy directly from Fane still. It'll save you 10% if you're buying an A60, but it's an amazing speaker. Can't recommend it highly enough, and to tame the fizz in a tweed amp, it's probably exactly what you need, I would have thought. David Garcia. Man, I got some t-armonds in my Streamliner 2420 big hollow body, and the mids and bass are snappy and awesome like the telly, but the highs are so reserved with a pinging noise in the harmonics that makes this ear-piercing harmonic. So that's referring to these pickups here, the TV Jones t-armonds that I put in the Gretsch, which I really, really love. One big thing about getting these pickups right, I think, is the 1 meg pots, because Gretsch originally used 1 meg linear taper pots in the original Jets that had the Dynasonic pickups in. And I think that's probably for 2 reasons. One, these are actually very high output pickups. I think they're like 11 or 12K, and hotter DC resistance pickups, not output. They typically sound a bit darker. But also you have the volume setup of the individual pickup volume controls going into the master volume in series, so the higher value pots stop that from kind of loading the signal down. And having the 1 megs in there, it kind of takes that kind of thumpy low end and lets the top come through in a way it wouldn't with, 500k pots in series. So might be worth trying the 1 meg pots. But yeah, these are great. But there is a video coming probably in a couple of months. All my videos getting jumbled around at the moment, comparing these to a telly and also to a P90 and a Les Paul Junior, just for interest. And these are, with the 1 meg pots, these are actually brighter than the telly, but they have much less sort of snap in the upper mid-range. So I guess it depends what you're calling treble. They have a lot less bite to them than a telly, but they do have that kind of glassiness with the 1 meg pots. So I recommend experimenting with the 1 megs because it does let the high end come through from these pickups, and that will kind of balance out the low end and bring the trebles up to kind of match it. They sound great with the 1 meg pots. I really, really like them. Glenn Marion. Wow, I wasn't expecting the two to sound so similar. I recently purchased the Volbrook Columnar. I've seen them, they look really cool. Which is also a high voltage tube overdrive. It was interesting to A/B it with different types of overdrive circuit. The non-tube clipping circuits really did sound colder and flatter to my ears. It might make for an interesting video to compare the sound of a tube, soft clipping, hard clipping and transistor based overdrive. I am thinking about making that video. Please do comment underneath if that's a video that would be interesting for you. I'm thinking about it. To be honest, I might wait a little while to do that, only because I'm on the waiting list for a Kingsley Jester, which will hopefully be here kind of late summer. So I might wait to be able to include that in the video as well, because I'm expecting that to sound amazing. But let me know in the comments if you'd like to see a comparison between kind of solid state pedals and tube pedals, and look into what the tubes actually offer you over a solid state pedal and whether they're worth the money and crazy power requirements and all that. Let me know if you'd like to see that. I'll put it together if you do. Okay, that. So the serial numbers above 400 are brighter. Is it possible to tweak an older one yourself to make it brighter? And this is the Retrosonic Flanger. So it all gets a bit confusing. I can't remember the exact numbers, but from what I remember, the first 40 or so in terms of serial number had a fair bit more filtering up top, and that was the original Retrosonic Flanger I demoed a few years ago when it first came out. From 40 to, I don't know, 250, 300 or so, it had less filtering up top, but still a little bit more. And the current production run from 250 to present is the kind of much less filtering up top that absolutely nails the sound of my original Mistress. So if I can't remember the exact serial numbers, drop Tim an email, I'm sure he can tell you. I don't know what the mods are in order to do it yourself, but you can drop the pedal back to Tim. I know he kind of mods older pedals to current spec. So that's what I would recommend. I wouldn't recommend kind of going in there with a soldering iron. From what I remember, they're surface mount components, which are notoriously a nightmare to try and work with yourself with a soldering iron. It's kind of, you know, a computer does all the soldering in that, and it can do it much more kind of delicately than we can with a massive soldering iron. I recommend sending it back to Tim. I'm sure he'll sort you right out with that. Bandit Sharp, and a long comment here, but the bit I wanted to refer to was at the end here. My only gripe with Electrode, which I discovered today, is the power is positive tip polarity. I was most disappointed today when my new Strymon Zoomer power supply would not power the fire bottle, as all outputs are of negative tip configuration. The Zoomer is switchable 9, 12 and 18 volts, which is why I bought it. I think potential Electrode buyers should be aware of this, should they want to power their pedals via this method. So yeah, most Electrode pedals are centre positive. You know, it's fairly rare to find centre positive, which is why pretty much all power bricks essentially just give you centre negative. And also, if you accidentally plug a centre positive output into a centre negative pedal, it's probably going to go bang, and it'll only be a matter of minutes before someone does that and they're writing angry emails to Strymon. So yeah, most power supplies just give you a standard kind of centre negative output, but all you need is one of them. So this is a polarity reverse cable. I think they're about £5, and you just take the centre negative output from your power supply, plug it into here, and that flips the polarity. So you can absolutely power your Electro pedals from your power bricks. You just need a cable. There are other pedals that have centre positive too, but it is fairly rare. Like some older kind of vintage style fuzzers and treble boosters require centre positive. I think from memory, my old Memory Man was 24 volt centre positive, I think. So, you know, it is out there as a sort of power configuration, but it is a lot less common to find centre positive and centre negative. All you need is one of them, £5, and you're absolutely sorted. So you can absolutely power your Electrode from your power brick. Reckless Toboggan, okay? This is the first Neo speaker I've heard that doesn't have some weird, constant and permanent upper mid treble frequency that makes me want to throw it off a very tall building because it bores a hole in my ear brain. Yeah, well, I mean, I've never played a Neo speaker before the N30, or knowingly at least. I'm sure I have at some point. And a lot of people have said in the comments, like, that sounds great, and everyone's very surprised it sounds great, and it really does sound great. And yeah, I have heard a few things about Neo speakers, how they have a weird mid-range thing that no one can ever dial out. The N30 sounds great, so absolutely recommend checking it out. If you have preconceptions about Neo speakers like I did, it might challenge those preconceptions. It's a very, very nice speaker. Brian H. Joe, I love your channel and level of guitar nerdism, not a word, it is now, that you share. The Monty's guitar pickups that I ordered for my Firebird arrived today. Keep up the great content. Oh, wonderful. Monty's make fantastic pickups. And a Firebird's a guitar I've never owned. I don't think I've ever even played a Firebird. I've got friends who have Firebirds, but of course I'm left-handed, so I can never play the things. So, I mean, that is one guitar I would love to have. So if one ever crops up secondhand for a good price, I'll probably have to jump on it. But I've always wanted a Firebird. And there are a few other guitars that I've never looked into that I'd like to, like a Fender Offset, for example, like a Jazzmaster. That could be a lot of fun. But a Firebird is pretty much top of my list at the moment. Yusef Kassem, the stock sounds muddier compared to the upgrades, at least to my ears. And that's going back to the sort of full upgrade video I did on this guitar here. And I think that was a very, very good summation of what all the changes did. The stock pickups in here with the stock electronics and the hardware, it was a great sound, but it did sound very, very muddy. This setup has so much more high end and clarity and definition. I really, really love what it did to the sound. Martin Liu, going to sit on the fence and say I really liked both setups. Like you already said, both are great for differing situations, exactly. And that's why I've kept the original pickups and hardware and electronics all safely stored in a box in a cupboard, because I want to be able to get back to that old configuration if I ever want it. This is much more to my tastes nowadays in terms of what I want this guitar to sound like. But the original specification, the kind of fat, high output, bloated mid-range thing, is perfect for that kind of modern classic rock thing. Is great, and I want to kind of have that as an option. So yeah, both configurations are absolutely brilliant. Brian Carter, a great video, Joe. Thank you. Very well documented, and I like the overall improvement. A job very well done. I also try to get the best cleans out of my Les Pauls, because you can always add drive and EQ to make it sing, but you can't remove mud if the pickups are powerful. Yeah, exactly. You can kind of darken a bright sound, but thinning out and brightening a dark sound when the treble isn't there. You can boost treble, but to me, boosting treble always sounds a bit weird. It sounds a bit kind of fake and artificial and never sounds that nice. But, you know, rolling off top frequencies using the tone controller and overdrive is absolutely possible. So I generally prefer guitars to be brighter than I want them to be, and then just ride the tone control. And it gives you full control over all of that, and it sounds wonderful. Paul Stafford Cook, what a great video. I'd go so far as to say this vid is an important resource for all of us vintage tone chasers. I can't even talk today. You clearly put a lot of time into this, and so I'm sure the guitar community will be grateful for years to come. As to the results, it's like you've taken a blanket off the amp. Definite improvement. And the guitar looks even cooler now. I really thought the mismatched coloured bobbins would go mad with my OCD, but they actually look very cool. Yeah, to be honest, I thought they would too. And I did actually experiment with putting some pickup covers on here. Didn't prefer the sound. But they've really grown on me. Originally, it was really annoying me that the pickup's white and the plastic is sort of cream coloured and it doesn't kind of match completely. But I actually really like the look of this guitar now. I think it looks fantastic. So yeah, that's definitely grown on me too. Reckless Toboggan, again. Wow, I figured the pickups would have made a difference, but the amount and quality of clarity, articulation and balance that the new wiring and hardware really made much more of a difference than I'd anticipated. Yeah, I think the hardware is a very subtle change. To my ears, it added a little bit more kind of treble, but less bite in the upper mid-range. It made it sound a little less like a telly, I suppose, but it did add a little bit more kind of note definition and clarity throughout. But the wiring did make a big difference too, and the original pots that were in this guitar were, I think, like 460k, so putting in some 540k pots, well, that's where most of that clarity will have come from in phase 2, the kind of complete rewire. The braided wire might have made a tiny bit of difference too, but those pots are what's going to make the big difference overall. Sarah Hay, yes please, maybe you could compare it against your other chorus pedals, and this is my new acquisition. This is a vintage Boss Dimension C, which I've never really played before. Oh man, this is just a magic pedal. It's the sound I didn't know I was missing. I mean, I've played lots of vintage modulation pedals, CE1, CE2, Mutron Phaser, 74, Phase 90, Electric Mistress, VB2 Vibrato, all the classics. I don't think any pedal has impressed me instantly as much as this has. It is just inspiring beyond belief. And yeah, I am going to compare it to the other chorus pedals. So I'm waiting a little bit to make that video because I have just bought a 1982, I think, Boss CE3. So I'm waiting for that to turn up because then I can do the CE1, CE2 and CE3 comparison, and I'll probably throw the Dimension C and maybe the VB2 in there as well. So yeah, that video will be coming probably in a month or so. But it's such a good pedal. Steve Turner, what a brilliant sounding pedal. And this is the Limelight Fuzz from Crazy Tube Circuit. It's a really great sounding thing. I bought a fair few over the years, but each one ends up a bit of a disappointment. I just can't find one that suits me long term. This seems to cover a lot of bases. I could press the trigger on this. Fully recommend you pulling the trigger, Steve, because this is amazing. The beam control takes you from kind of spitty Maestro FZ1 territory up to kind of Mark II tone bender with Mark 1 in the middle. I describe this as being like a greatest hits of British fuzz pedals. It really is great. But I do also have a comparison coming at the end of March, I think, of the Crazy Tube's Constellation. And this is fantastic too. It's kind of 6 fuzz circuits in one. So you've got fuzz face, tone bender, you've got a range master, the range master stacked into the fuzz face, which is just crazy. So yeah, this is a really good pedal too. So you might want to hold fire and see which you prefer, but the Limelight is a stunning sounding fuzz. Really, really impressed me. And also on the same video, Enrico Palazzo, happy to see some Dan Electro action today. Yeah, the Dan Electro really seemed to suit the Limelight. I don't know what it was. I tried a few different guitars and I just loved how it sounded. There's something about that Dan Electro. Now, granted, I've put some really nice pickups in there and changed the hardware around a bit. But, you know, on this channel, generally I'm using my Heritage 535 or SG with the OX4s in it, and you know, Les Paul Customs, kind of big money guitars. I think that Dan Electro is about £200, and it just sounds great. It's a very different sound. It sounds like a Dan Electro, which is really kind of unique, and it's not a particularly posh guitar sound, but it just sounds really different, and you know, it just suits certain situations, and it suited the Limelight. So I was happy to bring it out, and it's a really nice guitar, that. Below Blues, my Lola P90 sounds too trebly on my Eastman SB56 compared to other P90 guitars I have or had. It has 500k pots. Which one would add warmth and fatness in the sound? It depends how much darker you want the guitar to sound overall. I mean, you could just turn the tone knob down. That's why it's there. If it's a little bit dark, just turn the tone knob down. That's one way of doing it. Dropping the pickup away from the string slightly can make it sound less harsh. That can be a bit tricky with some P90s, especially if it's like a dog ear. If you can drop the pole screws down a little bit, that might help. But if you start getting into electronics, essentially the lower the number on the pot, the darker the guitar will sound. So if you want to darken the guitar a little bit, it might be worth trying like a 250k pot in the tone and leave the 500 in the volume. That'll darken things slightly. You can buy 300k pots. That might be good for the volume if you want to darken it a little bit more. Or a lot of people prefer 250ks for volume and tone with a P90, and that will darken it quite a lot. So I personally prefer 500ks with my P90s, but depending on the extent you want to go to, 250ks all round might be what you're after, but 300 is worth experimenting with, and you can use different values in the volume and tone for different effects. The volume tends to have more of an effect than the tone, so putting a 250k in the volume will darken the sound more than just putting a 250k in the tone, for example. So feel free to experiment, but the tone control's there for a reason. That might be all you need. Just run the guitar on 5 and it might sound glorious. And finally, this is on one of my old pedal board builds. Alessandro Adamo, Sorete boards and Fantastico socks. Wonderful. That really made me smile. I'm not entirely sure what Sorete means. I'm hoping that's positive, but I'm glad my socks were Fantastico. That makes me very happy to hear. So that is it for this month. Thank you ever so much for all your questions and comments. I do my best to get back to all of you in the comments sections. Obviously, I can't feature every comment from the month in these end of month Q&A videos, so I just kind of cherry pick a few that are interesting and will hopefully be useful for other people to hear the answer to. So there's a lot coming in March. What have we got coming up? We've got the Dimension C demo mid-March. Watch out for that one. I run it in mono, into an overdrive, and also in stereo, which is just absolutely glorious sounding. I'm doing another video with the Kingsley Page, and I'm trying to boost into the Kingsley Page with the fire bottle to match the sound of the Electro tube drive with the stock tubes in. I did a kind of the opposite of that last month of putting lower gain tubes in the tube drive and comparing it to the Page. I'm kind of boosting the Page to bring it up to the gain of the tube drive with the stock tubes. So that's quite an interesting video. And at the end of the month, we have the Crazy Tubes Constellation coming as well, and that sounds phenomenal, so watch out for that. But yeah, so it should be a fun month, March. Keep your comments coming in, and fingers crossed I will feature your comment in the end of March Q&A. But for now, thank you ever so much for watching, folks. I hope this video was interesting and useful for you. I hope you're enjoying the spring weather wherever you are, and I will see you very, very soon. Bye-bye.